G'day Mindstars, Aaron here. Welcome to Unpack, the show about life shit. Unpack is about raw, honest conversations with people from all walks of life as they tell the remarkable stories of well-being and resilience. I'm delighted today for this episode to have here Dameyon Bonson, who is an entrepreneur in health, the founder of Black Rainbow, and also Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island gay man. So Dameyon, awesome to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here. Cheers.
Let's start at the beginning. Tell us, what is Black Rainbow? What's it about?
Okay, Black Rainbow is a national advocacy platform for the Indigenous LGBQTI community. LGBQTI stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer and intersex. How it started was I was working in remote Aboriginal communities in the Kimberley starting in 2011, and in my role there in suicide prevention, I had to do an environmental scan of the communities I was working in and seeing what services were available for the Aboriginal community in times of crisis, but also support in terms of preventing suicide. And I walked into an Aboriginal medical service in one of the communities, and there was a funeral notice that was up and it had the picture of this young boy who was about 12 or 13. And in that moment I thought, okay, what if this young boy was gay? What services would be available in this town for this young Aboriginal boy if he was? And I did a bit of a mapping exercise, just mental map, and thinking, well, hang on, this service, no, this service, no, this service, no. Okay, I'll go back to Broome and have a bit of a look around. And at that time, I think I'm 44 now, so what was I, about 37 at the time, I hadn't even realised at that moment in my life that there was nothing within suicide prevention for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander LGBTQTI community. And I realised that once I started going, okay, let's see what's in broader WA, or greater WA, and there was nothing. What there had been though, there had been a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander visibility within the HIV space, but nothing outside of that. And then even nationally, I had a look around and I thought, there's nothing here. And I was in a job at the time, I had a full-time job. What I do with Black Rainbow now is nothing what I thought I'd ever be doing with it. And I naively thought that if I told the organisations that had been funded by the Commonwealth that there's a gap in their service delivery, that they would step up to the plate and do something. And the ones that I spoke to, and again, there's probably a lot that I didn't speak to, but the ones that I did speak to, they didn't do anything. So I thought, well, what can I do within my capacity to affect some sort of change, or just to make some inroads? So what I did was I got on my mobile phone, my iPhone, in a remote community, and I set up a Twitter account and a Facebook account. And the idea was that an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander LGBTQTI person who was feeling isolated or alone, whether they were in a remote community, sitting in their inner city, Sydney, or they're in Alice Springs, just somewhere where they were feeling isolated, in their bedrooms even, you know, they could get online and see themselves reflected positively and feel part of a community. And that's where it all started from there. And it's kind of really exploded. And it's only been the last, say, 6 to 8 months that I've been able to step outside the bubble of it and see what it is that we've accomplished. Because it is a we now. It was just myself. And I tell you what, if you're ever going to start something on social media, you've got to put in a lot of hard work. Like I've spent hours and hours, especially growing it and putting the content out there and stuff like that, because that was really important to me, that it's like that it's consistent.
Yes.
But about 2 years in, I knew that it needed to go to a next level. By then as well, I'd self-published the country's only report in suicide prevention that spoke about the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander LGBTI community. I couldn't get any funding support for that, so I crowdfunded that report for about $27,000. I crowdfunded that money. That paid me so I could write that report. And then when it got to a point, it's like, well, okay, we're still not getting much traction here with any sort of structural change, and none of the organisations are really doing anything. Well, something really interesting happened when I turned to crowdfunding, and well, I was deliberate in why I did it. We'd already got quite a bit of exposure for existing in the first place, but I knew that by doing crowdfunding, I'd get some media over it too, which would help with the crowdfunding, because that's a tough gig as well. For the last 36 hours, I was awake, and with the crowdfunding, how it works is that you set your target of say $100,000, but then you set a benchmark that you have to get that minimum of before you get any money. And I set it quite low at $25,000. The people that I did it through said, oh, you know, shoot for 50. I thought, well, no, I need the money. I need the money. So I set it at 25, and I think in the last 36 hours I got the $13,500. But I was emailing, Twitter, Facebook. It was every hour, just constantly going. And but what I realised is, as some of the work had progressed, and that to take Black Rainbow to the next level, which I still don't really know what that is, it's really an organic process, is that I'm going to need a leadership group. So what I did was I did a scan of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander LGBTQTI people who are active in the country in some kind of either advocacy role or have been working in health, but also more importantly, how did they interact with Black Rainbow? And what I did was then I contacted everybody that I contacted, wanted, if I could, get one person from each of our diverse group. But also they need to have come from a background, more so a professional background than a lived experience background, but we've got that as well, that covered off on quite a number of areas. So we had a lot of different people from different backgrounds participating. So we've got a gentleman on there who works for the First Peoples Disability Network.
Wow.
And he actually has a physical disability. We've got another gentleman, well, when he started, he had been working in youth homelessness, so bringing that to the table. And these are all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander LGBTQTI people too, so we're part of the Diversity Rainbow. We've got a sister girl, which is a transgender Aboriginal girl from the Tiwi Islands, that brings that lived experience and also living in a remote community as well. We've got an academic gentleman who identifies as queer. He's doing his PhD at the moment. We've got another Torres Strait Aboriginal girl from Brisbane, and she comes with a criminal law background in human rights. And then we've got a young fella who he also grew up in a remote community, but it brings that youth element to us because he provides a lot of solutions. I'm 44, I think he's 23, so there's the considerable generation gap.
Bit of a difference.
But I realised early on that I don't necessarily have the solutions, but my leadership style, I did some leadership workshops, some courses several years ago, over 10, 12 years ago now, and I realised that my leadership style is around questions, that I lead with a question in hand. I don't necessarily come up with the solutions, but I'm very good at identifying the questions. And this is where the work that I do comes around this health entrepreneurship.
Yes.
Is that with being an entrepreneur, there has to be a problem. You have to identify what the problem is to solve it. And so that's where, for me, that language has come about, because the work that I do are mostly, I guess, if I say this, well, most known for the work with Black Rainbow. There's quite other pockets of work that I have done in the short time I've been working for myself, which has been about 4 years.
Can I just ask how it's accepted in the wider Indigenous Australian community?
I'll put it this way to people: depends on the spectrum of how you want to define acceptedness. There is more racism in the LGBTI community than what there is homophobia in the Aboriginal community. It doesn't mean that the homophobia doesn't exist, but when you look at the root cause of a lot of the homophobia, it's rooted in Christianity, it's rooted in the church impact, because where that message comes on about Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Whether we can, I don't have a time machine, so I can't tell you what happened 10, 15,000 years ago, but something that I did when I realised when I was studying my social work degree, I was doing some research into that space, and the one moment in time that really changed things up for me, I was looking for the LGBTQTI in Aboriginal history. I'm thinking, hang on a second, there wouldn't have been pride, there wouldn't have been no glitzy glamour, what they call disco balls, there would have been no feather boas. So how are people 10, 50, 60,000 years ago, how were they actually presenting as non-heterosexual back in that time? And I thought, well, we're not going to have, there's no time machine, we don't have any recordings as with some of the other colonised nations like Native America and also in the South Pacific, where they actually have recorded history of non-binary or gender diverse people. So that LGBTI community wasn't necessarily called that. They've got their own Indigenous language or native language around that. We don't necessarily have that here in this country. I know there is some language somewhere, but it's not my language and not my place to really say it. Plus, I think I'd butcher it anyways. But it's a really shifting point for me in terms of, do we need to go back in time to say, was it recognised then? And is that just so that we can justify our existence today? Or do we just we're here now, let's move forward with this? But I always interrogate, and we got people that come out who, I won't mention them by name, but they come out and they're high-profile Aboriginal people, and they come really. This particular person's a serial homophobe, and it's like, but hang on a second, where is this coming from? Where is your evidence around this that this is not accepted in our communities? Because that's absolutely rubbish.
Yeah.
Where is this actually coming from? Because the acceptance around it's going to be different in different communities, and I can only speak to my own experience, and that's what people share with me. And there's some, when we talk about acceptance as well, is there can be a knowledge of existence of people who identify as LGBTQI in the community, but the way in which they're accepted, it will be of differing levels.
Of course.
Sort of thing, yeah.
Thinking of that journey, and as a Aboriginal man, a gay Aboriginal man, this unpacks very much about talking about well-being and resilience. So I'm really interested to know what is well-being for you, and how do you implement that in your life?
Look, it's only came about probably in the last 3 or 4 years that I'm really able to articulate a lot, even for myself. But I'll just, going back to when I was how old would I have been? So it was 1980, 86, 87. So I was born in 74. So it would have been about, 88 was 14, 15, 16. Yeah, it would have been 16, I think, 15 at the time. I was bullied quite relentlessly because I was actually really quite an effeminate teenager, and I think that was purely because my exposure to the gay community was effeminate men.
Yes.
I didn't know that I'd grow up into being this hairy beast.
6'6".
Not at all, and so I was bullied quite a bit, actually, really, and to the point where I actually moved and went to boarding school in Cairns so this was in 1986. So I moved to Cairns, went to boarding school in Cairns for 86 and 87. That's how bad it was, that I was just relentlessly bullied by these two guys. And how I see the work that I do now, because it's really, with the work, being an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander gay person, and the work that Black Rainbow is trying to achieve, and I'm trying to achieve with this particular area of work that I do, is that we're not in any of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health plans, and we're also not really included in a lot of the mainstream health stuff, policy, also in the LGBTI community. So essentially with the work that we're doing, and what I do is like we're going to the Aboriginal community and saying, guess what, you're homophobic because you're not including us in your health, and go to the queer community or the LGBTI community and say, guess what, you're a bunch of racists. And that makes you a lot of friends, as you can imagine. But what I found is that the resilience, and it's a term that gets used a lot, but for me it's like the experience I'm feeling now is that of being bullied. And it's like, this 13-year-old kid survived that.
Yes.
Yeah, this 44-year-old man, yeah, good fucking luck.
Give it to your best.
Yeah, pretty much. It is, and then that's the, I guess, the resilience or the power that I feel within myself. I said, because it was horrible, and for me back in those days too, and it's in being reflective, having now working in suicide prevention, I don't think I was necessarily suicidal, but the messaging that I was getting was that I should kill myself for being gay. And I remember fighting back the tears in bed as a teenager, going, I don't want to be gay, I don't want to. Oh no, it wasn't that. It's that I don't want to kill myself. I don't want to kill myself, because I actually really like being gay. I love who I am, and it's not. I don't know what that is, but I think it's about, because I know who I am. I just love being who I am, and don't want to not be who I am.
Where was that message coming from?
Which one, sorry?
That you should kill yourself for being gay.
Well, at the time as well, like, it's in the 80s, and this was when HIV had really hit the scene, and so there was a lot of homophobic discourse in the world, and I won't go through the name, but there was a lot of really negative language out there that was directed at the gay community around having HIV and stuff. So even as a child, I remember sitting at home and watching 60 Minutes, and I think Jana Vent back in the day, she was hosting, and they were doing it, and the conversation in the lounge room from the adults was also negative, and I'm thinking, you've got a 12, 11-year-old kid here who's going through all this, and you're also sharing this hatred.
Wow.
And this is the thing around where, I guess for parents and stuff, need to really be mindful of that. Like, it's a really different time now. Like, I have a lot of high school mates and girlfriends, and both male and female, and some of them have kids that it's questionable. There's particularly some of the males are a bit more flamboyant and stuff like that, and it's really interesting connecting them later in life, because they knew that I was gay back at high school. Yeah. It's like, I said, you know what can you do? If he wants to carry around a gold lame purse, who am I to argue? He's just my son. So that's really wonderful that exists, compared to you know, when I was growing up, the gender roles around that, it's always been okay for girls to play with trucks, but heaven forbid if a guy played with Barbie dolls, not that I did, that I'm more into Star Wars than, I was not into Barbie. I like Star Wars, sort of thing. So it's a different time now than what it is back then. Definitely.
So if people are watching or listening and experiencing bullying, homophobia, racism, what are some of the things you've learned? It sounds like maybe it's a mindset, or what have you learned that you could, I don't know, talk about what works for you and how you don't let it pierce your bulletproof shield, it sounds like.
Look, what I can say, and it takes, it's more about giving tools. And I think if I can say that those voices are just noise, and really they're just loud. There's not a lot of them. There is actually more love in this world than there is hate, believe it or not. But there actually is. It's just that sometimes the hate is just louder.
Yes.
And something that I've learned as well is that it's just noise. So turn around and walk straight into it, because it can't hurt. Noise can't hurt you. And that's ultimately what it is. But it is around, you know, for me, I like to really talk in practical terms when I, you know, talk about some of the stuff that and again, you know, what would I say is around, well, just remember, they're just being loud.
Yes.
And there is absolutely more love in this country and in this world, and there is more love in your life than there is hate. The love might not be as loud at this moment, but it's there, and you'll find your tribe. You'll find your tribe. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think because I think working with young people, sometimes they take those voices and they turn them inside, and all of a sudden it becomes the dominant voice in their head. Yeah,
look, and we're watching the evolution of sexuality and gender diversity in this country, and our young people, they are fucking knocking it out of the ballpark. Yeah. I love it. They are just saying, get fucked to the gender norms of this country, and they're just running with it. And what's also really quite fantastic is so are their friends. Their friends are getting behind them, and it seems to me, and I don't, again, look, I'm 44, I'm not at high school, I don't know, and it's no doubt there's going to be some young gay people who are going to be struggling, you know, with lesbian, trans. Again, that's not my experience, I can't speak to that. But there's I find there's actually a lot of camaraderie in young people. And, you know, there's something that really bugs me about our country is we actually don't place enough value on our young people. They're so amazing, and they're this next generation that's coming through in terms of acceptance and embracing people of difference. We've got a really good young cohort good young cohort of young people.
Yes.
To really to take our country from a cultural standpoint around inclusion and diversity and acceptance and love, that the next generation is really going to bring that up. So it's been really fascinating for me just to observe. Yeah.
That's great. And I love what you said before about walking into the noise.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're doing that professionally in your job, and you walk into it and you're giving some back, you know.
This is it. The lion's roar is only loud. It's not going to bite you.
Can I ask you a question? And as we finish up, I want to just quickly talk about you. And I think of young people who might be watching, or youngish people who might be watching. And what would you tell yourself, a young man who left home at 16, who has been on this journey of discovery, challenge? You've experienced a lot in your 45 years.
44.
44. I'm 45. You're the young one. You're the baby. So what would you tell yourself or someone in that spot that is where you started now?
It's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay.
It's got to be okay. You know, and you got to fall over a lot. And that's just life in general. Some of us, and we're not going to fall over because we're clumsy. We're going to fall over because there's going to be jagged rocks thrown in our pathway. And there's, you know, for me, it's like when people say life wasn't meant to be easy, it's like, no, life wasn't meant to be hard. I don't think it was meant to be hard. It was not supposed that it wasn't. Again, we have challenges and stuff like that, but I think ultimately it's like it's going to be okay. Yeah. It's going to be okay. And I say that with a frog in my throat, because straight away I went back to that kid. And I go there. I go there to quite a bit actually. I've recently, but it's also because that's where that's where the bullying was. But to where I am now, and also not necessarily overcoming the bullying, but just being a lot older and a lot wiser and stuff. But also in the last, I mean, this could happen to someone in their 30s or their 20s. It didn't happen to me when I was in my 40s. Those decisions that I made about the environment that I'm going to live in has made my life so much better. So the message is, I'm going to say that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Find your tribe. Find your tribe. It's going to be okay.
Because there was a time when you thought it wasn't going to be okay.
Absolutely. But the greatest thing, and this is the thing that got me through everything, is the love from my mother and my love for my mother. That has got me through every single hard moment in my life. So particularly around the thoughts of suicide. And look, I don't never consider myself to, well, I think by definition, people could clinically say, well, Dameyon, you've been suicidal in your life or your time. The concept or the idea of suicide, I always blocked off because I'm not doing this to my mother. I'm not going to do this. It would break her heart. And that was really what kept me through those moments. It wasn't that there was no suicide. Well, again, the language around suicide, it's really quite difficult to explain, but I don't ever consider myself to ever being suicidal, but I know that it existed out there as an option or what have you, but it was always the thing. It's like, one is that I couldn't do that to my mother, and again, being at 44, not 45, knowing where I am now and what I'm doing, is that it's going to be okay. Life can be easy, but there's just going to be some, jagged rocks along the way. And you will fucking fall over and you will get scarred, but you'll get back up again.
And it's common to have those thoughts.
Absolutely.
Do you still have thoughts still pop up?
Look, and this is the thing too around the idea, this language around suicidation. I think there is more people in this country who have thoughts of suicide than we actually know, because when we talk about suicide and suicidation, we talk about it in such frightening ways. And I think that it contributes actually to the stigma about it, or when no one wants to talk about it. Because if you've got suicide thoughts, oh fuck, you must have a mental illness, let's get you into a program and let's see you to a psychologist. No, pay my fucking bills, That's why I'm suicidal. That's why I'm having fuck, I just want to end my life. And it could be a thought like that. But if you told your GP or your psychologist, there'd be like ambulances coming and all the rest of it. It doesn't have to be that catastrophic, And that's where I think as well other problems around some of this discussion that we're having, is that people are fearful of saying that they're having these ideas because this ambulance or whatever shape or form with a big mental health written on it comes running at you. It's like, no, I'm just going through a fucking bad period right now, but this is what I need to get me through this.
Yeah.
And, again, that's from my experience. Other people have different experiences, but this is purely from my experience. And I often think of these farmers and these men out there who are dying by suicide. It's like, a drought doesn't, where's the connection? It may be over a period of time, but what's happening over that period of time is that you're struggling. Well, let's stop the struggle. That's where the intervention needs to happen, not the effect of the struggle. That's downstream. We need to be going upstream at where the problem is, where the cause is, and get to that root cause. That's where I think and that's not what mental health does. Mental health responds to problems that have been caused by something else. Well, let's get to the cause.
And I often think just exactly what you say, that if we say it is common to have those thoughts,
Yeah.
lots of people have those thoughts, and really we need to let people talk about that. If they don't talk about it, it's actually get more dangerous. If you
Absolutely,
don't talk about it.
and not pathologise people, not medicalise people because they're having those thoughts. It's like, well, why are you having? Again, look, and going to see a psychologist or counsellor, yes, that fits within the mental health spectrum. But when I think in terms of when I say the mental health is the diagnosis side of stuff. When we get to that diagnostic level of you've got depression, or you've got that. If you're going through a bad time, but if you're going through a bad time financially, go see a financial counsellor. Because you need to, I tell myself, I said, oh shit, I can avoid this and have these financial struggles. Not that I don't, but if I did, you could let them go on. Yeah, of course that's going to have implications for your mind further down the track, but look at the root cause. What is the problem right now? You're in financial strife, you've got financial. Go and get some help around your financial stuff. Same with me when I was 40 kilos heavier. It's like, well, I'm not going to go to a mental health counsellor to lose weight. No, I'm going to go to a fucking gym and go to guys who actually know what they're talking about, who know, and this is the great thing about the place I go training for warriors. It's not just about the exercise that we do there and the weightlifting that we do there. It's also the nutritional advice.
Yep.
And something that I think I really love about these guys as well is they teach you how to do it properly. But then going to that root cause of what the issues are and going to that problem there, because you can get, I think that there are people out there who are overweight who do then become depressed because they are overweight. Well, let's find out, first of all, why are you eating so much in the first place? That's the root cause. Because it's also, and I say this to people as well, and I've had a lot of comments around how great I look. I said, but you know what you can't see is how well I am. Is how fantastic I am on the inside. I said, because that heavy guy, or 40 kilos heavier 2 years ago, he wasn't healthy on the inside. That's why he looked the way that he did. And people could see how I look now and said, oh, wow, you look fantastic. I'm thinking, fuck, what did you think 2 years ago when I was out like this? That's what I also think about. But it's like, I'm well on the inside now.
So what came first? Was there a first and second, or does it happen together?
Identifying what the problem was.
Yeah.
And the problem was that it was just the relationships that I had both professionally and socially were just unhealthy for me. And I removed myself, and also removed from those by other people, which was a really great thing, that I found myself no longer in toxic relationships. And whether they were social or professional, and this is working outside the system is a much more beautiful place to be, and going rogue, if you will, it's a lot healthier place for me to be.
Yeah.
Absolutely, but I had to identify what that was first, and then work out what steps I needed to take to get to what A, B, C, and D to get to the end. You know, so it's been a progress, but I've been very okay. This is what I need to do next, and for me, it's like, all right, if I'm going to go to the gym, I've got to commit to going to the gym, but I had to find the right one. And this is what I'll say to people: it's like, you think you've got to get healthy, don't just sign up at a gym. Do your research and find one that's going to work for you.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Last question I want to ask you around, you've touched on it, power. And I know from reading stuff you've written and following you that there's quite a lot of, well, not quite a lot, but some people will avoid you.
Yes. Yes.
People in power,
yes.
people with maybe control the funding.
Yes.
Tell me, what do you think about that? What's happening there?
Well, my mind was changed in the last 36, 48 hours actually over that, and somebody quite wise said to me that these people are ignoring you because you hold a bit of power over them. You have a solution to a problem that they're not ready to face yet. And so this is why you're not getting meetings with those people who hold significant decision making around funding in this country and decision making around policy, is because the information that you have, they don't want to hear just yet because it's too powerful for them. And that's been really, really, really wonderful advice that I've received. It's helped shift the experiences of, because I thought, I'm sick and tired of being ignored, but it's like, why are they ignoring me and think, is it, and I don't like going to the place always just because they're racist or they're homophobic, which ultimately the behaviour is, but it's like around, I hold a bit of power in the conversation here, and they don't want to meet with me to have that conversation, yeah. So thank you very much for that advice, by the way.
I won't take it. So for people who are watching and love what you're talking about, or want to know more, or want to dive into that space, or sort of start that journey themselves, are there any takeaways that you can give? You've already talked about the book around charity. What was the
End of Charity by Nick Francis.
End of Charity by Nick Francis.
Yeah.
Any other?
Yeah, and it's a bestseller. It's everywhere, and I'm not usually someone that jumps on gravy trains, but I came across this book I think about 2 or 3 years ago, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I've just reread it again just recently, and there's takeaways from that. It's a really easy book. I'm actually about to give it to a mate of mine. I said to him today, you need to read this book. I've given it to my mother to read. My younger brother has read it. And the thing that I take away from that is that it's around changing the value that you place on something. And so that when a negative experience happens, why is it a negative experience? And is there any actually positives within that experience? Or is something the way, even if it's a relationship, if you're expecting more gratification out of it and it's not the gratification that you're seeking, but just stop and think, okay, but I'm actually getting gratified in other areas of that relationship. Maybe I need to change where I'm placing the value on that relationship and what I'm getting back from that.
Yep.
And he uses a really great example about his relationship with his brother, which I won't get into because it's quite complex to explain. And I think I've explained about 5 times in the last 4 days to people talking about this book. But End of Charity as well, it really spoke to me in terms of my values. Around getting some of this work done, and I think it is because there's this capitalism that exists within the suicide prevention sector, and I tell you what, it is not as altruistic as people think it is. It is a fucking shit fight. I've pulled out of every national conversation and advisor group that I was ever on because it's just unhealthy. It's toxic. It's just, so I need to be around people that share my own values and in the work that I do, and it's a longer road. This is a long game. This isn't a short, quick fix. This is a long game. And this is the thing, it's like people talk about that they've worked really, really hard, and then there's those that actually fucking work really fucking hard. So there's people that work really, really hard on a marathon, on a straight road, and yes, you run a really long you run like 100 Ks. We're only running 20 Ks, but we've got bloody, ditches, we've got jagged rocks, we've got crocodiles. This is the hard road. This is the hard road. Yep. Long distances, like in terms of when people are working really hard, you've just run a long way. Fuck, I'm climbing shit over here. And this is the thing around with what we're doing, and then for myself, I guess, around, is that I only want to work with people that share my own values, and I only want the particular stuff around Black Rainbow, or any partnerships with any work that I do, we've got to have a shared value system, otherwise we're not going to be really achieve what it is we're coming together to achieve. So.
Well, I'm hoping from this interview that lots of like-minded people will connect with you, because thank you so much.
Thanks, Aaron.
For joining us. Love the work. Love your work.
Likewise.
And thank you for joining us again on Unpack. Let's really shake up the conversation around well-being and mental health and suicide prevention in this country. So please connect, share, comment, and please join us again next time. So thanks very much for joining us on Unpack. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, thank you.
Awesome.